What is up, everybody? Welcome back to another video. In today's video, we are here to take a look at the Detroit Lions coaching staff that has been announced for the 2022 NFL season. This time around, we have much less turnover. We're also going to take a look at some of the moves that have been made in the rest of the NFC North, just to get a nice little update of where those teams are at. And finally, we got to hear from some of the Lions signings. We got some quotes from those guys that I wanted to share with you. So let's get it started.
The city's been down and it found a way to get up. And when you knock us down, we're going to get up. And on the way up, we're going to bite a kneecap off, all right? And we're going to stand up. And then it's going to take two more shots to knock us down. We're going to take another hunk out of you. Before long, we're going to be the last one standing.
Welcome everybody to my video. Glad you guys are here, and we're back to talk about the Detroit Lions. But we're kind of taking a pause almost on the Detroit Lions free agency news, sort of. We're going to take a look at some other teams within the NFC North and moves that they have made, but kind of a pause on some of the Lions free agency moves, as today has been pretty quiet, which has allowed me to dive into some film and stuff like that. However, the Detroit Lions also announced their coaching staff for the 2022 season, and there's a couple of new additions to that list, but there's one major new addition, and I have to believe this is the guy that Dan Campbell was saying that they may be looking to hire. He couldn't say who it was going to be because it wasn't official at the time, but this may be that guy. I don't know. Maybe next time we hear from Dan Campbell, he can confirm that, but that's what it seems like. And I didn't know who he was when I first saw the name. I was like, all right, I don't know who this guy is, but then I dove into some of the background, and all of a sudden I'm thinking, okay, I think the Lions just got better with this coach hiring. I want to start there. I want to dive into the Lions coaching staff. I will throw it up on the screen. So let's start there. Let's take a look at the Lions 2022 coaching staff that has been announced today. We'll get to the big name at the end, but there's two new names that I wanted to point out. So I'll throw this up on the screen. This is according to the Detroit Lions website. A lot of familiar names. Of course, Dan Campbell, head coach. Deuce Staley, the assistant head coach / running backs. All right, and I believe that was the same title that he had last season as well. Ben Johnson, the offensive coordinator. That's not a new addition, but we know he's stepping into that offensive coordinator role, who was our tight ends coach, and he kind of became like the passing game guy last season as Anthony Lynn kind of took a backseat into that area. Aaron Glenn, still the defensive coordinator. Dave Phipps, still the special teams coordinator. Here's the first new addition that we have to this that I wanted to point out. This is Wayne Blair, who is a defensive quality control coach for the Detroit Lions. I did some scouring at first, and I was like, okay, I have no idea who this guy is. But luckily, the Detroit Lions gave us a little bit of insight on who Wayne Blair is for the Detroit Lions. Apparently, he's an actor. Not this Wayne Blair, but there is a Wayne Blair out there that's an actor. But this Wayne Blair, this is his first coaching job in the National Football League. However, he has spent some time with the Detroit Lions back in 2021, working with the Lions in training camp in a Bill Walsh diversity coaching fellowship program. So now here he is as a Detroit Lions defensive quality control coach. So that's kind of cool how that worked out. He spent some time with the Lions through this program, and now all of a sudden, he's our defensive quality control coach. He is a former CFL player going back to 1999. He was picked up at supplemental draft as a linebacker out of Tulane. Spent a little bit of time coaching at the college ranks from 2002 to 2004 at the University of New Haven. And then aside from that, for the last 18 years, he's been coaching at the high school ranks. So I think that's really cool. To really go from high school to the NFL is pretty awesome. The high school ranks, he has been coaching for the last 18 years in the South Florida area. So now here he is as our defensive quality control coach. So that's kind of a cool way into the Detroit Lions. I thought that one kind of stuck out. Cameron Davis, the assistant defensive line coach. You know, our defensive line coach, of course, is Todd Walsh, and he's going to be working a lot more with guys like Charles Harris and things like that. And we'll get into that a little bit later. He's going to be working with guys like that this upcoming season. However, now we have a new assistant defensive line coach. This is Cameron Davis, coming from Lamar University. Most recently, where he was a defensive line coach. He also was a coach as a grad assistant with Texas A&M, Rice, and Kentucky. Here he is as a Lions assistant defensive line coach. So that's the other new addition I thought I'd point out. Tanner Ingstrand is now the tight ends / passing game coordinator. So he has another promotion now, kind of taking over the role that was Ben Johnson's title, and now he's kind of taking over that title. You see Jet Modkins in there still as a special teams assistant special teams coach. Hank Fraley, the offensive line coach. Twan Randall L, still the wide receiver coach. Seth Ryan, still the assistant wide receiver coach. Kelvin Shepard, now the linebackers coach, not just, outside linebackers. Now he's a linebackers coach. And as we said, Todd Walsh is the defensive line coach. There's going to be some schematic changes, which we'll talk about a little bit more because of what Charles Harris said that I wanted to point out. After mutually agreeing to part ways with Anthony Lynn after last season and Ben Johnson became the offensive coordinator eventually, I thought the Lions may look to hire some sort of run game coordinator or some guy with a run game background to kind of fill out what maybe they're losing a little bit with the Anthony Lynn parting ways, because that's what Anthony Lynn was known for, former running backs coach, and that's kind of how he got into the offensive coordinator role. Then he eventually became a head coach for the LA Chargers, then the offensive coordinator for the Detroit Lions. But run game was his background. So I'm thinking maybe the Lions would look to hire a guy like that. And if you look at the Lions hirings, no one has the title of run game coordinator. Lions could still hire somebody. They could still add that title to somebody, or they don't need to have that. You don't need a run game coordinator. So maybe they won't add that. However, that's what I was thinking the Lions may look to hire. Now they have Deuce Staley, who's of course a running backs coach. He's been a running backs coach for a very long time. And maybe they think that he could handle some of that because that's kind of how Anthony Lynn got into it. But he's also our assistant head coach and our running backs coach. So maybe he'll just have more of an impact over that. Ben Johnson being the offense coordinator, his background really isn't the run game side of things. And of course, you have Dan Campbell, if he continues to call plays, the tight ends coach background. However, the Detroit Lions did make a hiring to potentially help their offense, but it was not a guy that's really known for the run game side of things. Instead, it's a guy known for the pass game side of things, and that is Coach John Morton, who has been hired to the Detroit Lions as a senior offensive assistant to carry over that role that he has had for the last few seasons with the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, I didn't know who the heck John Morton was. I saw the name, like, okay, I don't know who that is. But after diving into some of the background of John Morton, it does seem to make sense why the Lions hired him. You could see the connections, but you can also see that he's done a pretty good job at what he's done, and that is the pass game. And I like how the Lions continue to try to improve with their coaching staff. They have a very strong coaching staff, and it looks like it may have just gotten even better with John Morton in that senior offensive assistant role. Now, last season, we had Dom Capers kind of in that role defensively, and of course, he moved on, and now it's kind of like, okay, Aaron Glenn, you're good to go. But since this is the first season of Ben Johnson as the offense coordinator, to get a guy that's been in that role before in John Morton could be beneficial. There's a report out there that the Detroit Lions actually interviewed John Morton to potentially be the Lions offensive coordinator for this season. Obviously, he didn't get the job because now it is Ben Johnson. I didn't know the Lions actually did that. Maybe it's not true, but I've seen a report that John Morton was reportedly interviewed by the Lions for the offensive coordinator position. But it's kind of cool that he didn't get that job, even if he was interviewed for it. But now he's still coming to work as a senior offensive assistant. I think that's pretty awesome. Also, there were other teams interested, specifically the New Orleans Saints, who reportedly were looking to bring him back to their staff for 2022. Now, they've had a lot of turnover. Sean Payton, of course, retiring. They've had a lot of movement going on there, but the reports were that they were looking to bring him back onto their staff for this season. But as we can see, he chose the Lions. And if you chose the Lions and you didn't get hired for the offensive coordinator job, I think that's pretty darn cool. John Morton is a former NFL player that mainly spent time on the practice squad with teams like the Jaguars, the Packers, the Raiders. But he was also a former Canadian Football League player that played for Western Michigan. And he got into the personnel department first with the Oakland Raiders, where, again, he spent time on their practice squad. And then ultimately, he went to the coaching side of things. And it started with the Oakland Raiders, a senior offensive assistant. And that team made it to the Super Bowl when he was a senior offensive assistant starting in 2002. He was eventually elevated to the tight ends coach in 2004 with the Raiders under Norv Turner in 2004. He went to San Diego to coach at the college level in 2005, where Jim Harbaugh was the coach at the time. They went 11-1 that season. He was a wide receivers coach. Then in 2006, he landed with the New Orleans Saints. And this is the first connection that we have. Now, of course, Dan Campbell was not coaching in 2006, but it was Sean Payton's first season with the New Orleans Saints as a coach. In 2006, he came in as an offensive assistant / passing game coach, is what we were told. And in 2006, it was the first year with Sean Payton. It was also the first year of Drew Brees. A 3-13 record went 10-6. And Drew Brees had one of his better statistical seasons up to that point in his career. 26 touchdowns, 11 interceptions, completing over 64% of his passes, over 4,400 yards, and a 96.2 passer rating. You could argue it wasn't his best statistical season, but probably at least his second best statistical season up to that point in his career. It was his highest career passing yards, and it really wasn't even close at 4,400 yards. Also the second highest pass rating that he put up to that point in his career, and it was probably his second best touchdown to interception ratios. Then for John Morton, it was back off to the college ranks, where he joined USC from 2007 to 2010. In 2007 to 2008, he was their wide receiver / passing game, basically coordinator at that time with USC. Then in 2009, he became the offensive coordinator for the USC Trojans. This was the last season with Pete Carroll at USC. His quarterback was Matt Barkley, coming in for Mark Sanchez, who was the former quarterback and a high draft pick. His first season taking over as offensive coordinator, it was the first time quarterback Matt Barkley that put up 60% completion percentage, 15 touchdowns and 14 interceptions, and a 131 rating, scoring 26.5 points per game and going on to have a 9-4 season. And usually what you see with like first-year quarterbacks in college football usually don't go that well. That's a pretty solid season, but you then see the improvement in 2010, his second year as the offensive coordinator for USC, where Matt Barkley goes on to complete 62.6% of his passes, 26 touchdowns to 12 interceptions, a 141 rating, and they scored 31 points per game. So he was there for 2 seasons. Now that season was not with Pete Carroll, it was with a different head coach. He's back off to the NFL, where he was a wide receiver coach for the San Francisco 49ers from 2011 to 2014, and then he went back to the New Orleans Saints. So this was his second stint with the New Orleans Saints in 2015 and 2016, and this is where you have that crossover with Dan Campbell, which took place in 2016, where he was the wide receivers coach. So 2016, Dan Campbell was there coaching the tight ends. He was the wide receivers coach in 2016. Of course, Sean Payton was still there as the head coach. That leads him to his biggest stop as an NFL coach, which was the offensive coordinator for the New York Jets. So in 2017, he becomes the offensive coordinator for the New York Jets, working with Todd Bowles. Now, he only lasted for a season and then he was fired. But the reasons they gave for his fire, it is kind of surprising to see for the reason that he was fired. It didn't seem to make a ton of sense. There was even articles that, Jets people were putting out at this time that were like, I don't really see the reason that he was fired. It doesn't seem to add up. There was questions about he was passing the ball too much. Matt Forte, who was on the Jets at that time, came out and said that, he was trying to make it like the New Orleans Saints, even though their run to pass ratio was in the middle of the pack in that 2017 season. And what you'll see from the statistics is that they actually passed the ball less than they did the year before. But whatever reason, they fired him. However, I would not say that it was a failure with the New York Jets, especially considering the circumstances that he had. Plus, they went 5-11. They were trailing in a lot of games. So, of course, you're going to pass the ball a little bit more. However, when you just compare 2016, the year before he got there and took over as the offensive coordinator, to 2017, look at the difference in the quarterback play. It stands out big time. 2016, before he got there, they had Ryan Fitzpatrick as their quarterback. The guy threw 17 interceptions to 12 touchdowns. As a whole, from the quarterback position, they had a 67.6 passer rating, which was the worst in the National Football League, 16 passing touchdowns to 25 interceptions. They completed 56.5% of their passes. That's almost hard to look at in the NFL today. I mean, that's disgusting. And they had 550 passing attempts. But his first season taking over as the offensive coordinator. Now, keep in mind, it wasn't like he had some baller at quarterback. It was Josh McCown. And Josh McCown had a very solid season. 18 touchdowns to 9 interceptions. That's a 2-to-1 ratio, completing 67% of his passes. The guy had a 94.5 pass rating. That's not a bad season. That's really not a bad season. And as a whole, you could see the quarterback play was a little bit worse, but it was still a huge improvement from the season before. An 86.1 pass rating, which was in the middle of the pack. 19 touchdowns to 12 interceptions. Big improvement there. 198 yards per game. It was actually less yards per game, which makes me like, wait, what do you mean they passed the ball too much? It doesn't even make sense. Completing 63% of his passes. Not big improvement there. On only 510 attempts. So the narrative that was being pushed really didn't seem to make a lot of sense. I know the statistics aren't like insane or anything like that, but keep in mind, this is the best season that Josh McCown has ever had in the NFL. I mean, they outdid expectations coming into the season. Expectations clearly weren't that high. Sure, it was inconsistent. And when you see the team stats, yeah, they got worse because Bryce Petty took over for the last 3 games with an injury for Josh McCown. Bryce Petty only played in the NFL for 2 seasons, 2016 and 2017. But it was the best season in a very long career from 2002 to 2019 that Josh McCown has had in the NFL. It's really not that close. And at the same time, it was also a career season for Jermaine Kearse, which I think is part of the reason that he ended up with the Detroit Lions. He didn't play because of an injury. The best season he had in his entire career. And Robbie Anderson, it was probably the second best season that he had in his entire career. The season that you would argue is better is 2020 with Carolina, where he had almost 1,100 yards. That's about 150 more than he had back in 2017. But he also did that on 30 more receptions. Anderson had a huge season, 63 receptions for 940 yards, and there were complaints that they were like trying to give him the ball too much, basically. But it was like, yeah, Robbie Anderson's their best receiver, so why would we not go to that guy? Jermaine Kearse had 65 receptions for 810 yards. You can see their points per game went up. So I don't really know statistically how it was like worse, because it definitely doesn't look like it was worse. Plus, they won an extra game that season. But again, it kind of felt like a scapegoat thing. Like, okay, we had a bad season again with Todd Bowles, so let me fire the offensive coordinator and give it maybe one last shot. And of course, he wasn't there the next season because he was fired. But Todd Bowles would would also be fired after the next season as they went and drafted Sam Darnold. So that's the quarterback that he had to work with. It was bad enough that they felt like they had to go draft another quarterback. They drafted Sam Darnold and won 4 games the next season. He had a year off where he was not coaching, and then he moved to 2019. 2019, he becomes the senior offensive assistant, which is his current role with the Detroit Lions of the Las Vegas Raiders. Now, this was with John Gruden at the time until the 2021 season where things got, kind of messed up and ugly. But 2018, the year before he gets there, and again, he was just a senior offensive assistant, so I don't know how much, impact he necessarily had, but as a whole, it did get better year after year after year. John Gruden was a big fan of the guy. You can see before he got there, 2018, they were 4-12. They were only scoring 18 points per game. Derek Carr, 19 touchdowns to 10 picks, completing 69% of his passes, had a 93.9 pass rating, only 7.3 yards per attempt. The first year he gets there, 2019, and again, it's not just him. There's a lot that goes into this, but they were 7-9. Their points per game went up by 1.6 points. Derek Carr has a better statistical season. You can see the interceptions go down, which is kind of something that you notice everywhere. Like everywhere he is, the interceptions seem to go down with quarterbacks. Higher completion percentage, over 70%. Had a 100.8 pass rating, and it was 7.9 yards per attempt. Moved to 2020, it improved again. 8-8, 27 points per game. Carr had a fantastic season, 27 touchdowns to 9 picks, completed 67% of his passes, and a 101.4 passer rating, also 7.9 yards per attempt. And then 2021. Now, this took a little bit of a dip statistically, but they also went to the playoffs this year, and there was a lot of craziness going on because John Gruden, he was fired. Still made the playoffs though, 10-7, 22 points per game, which yes is a dip, but it's still 4 more than before he got there. 23 touchdowns, 14 interceptions, which, that definitely went up. Completing 68% of his passes, a 94 pass rating, which again was still technically better than the year that he got there. And his 7.7 yards per attempt was still higher than the year that he got there. The Raiders running kind of that West Coast system that, of course, the New Orleans Saints did when Sean Payton was there. You can see the connection, the overlap with Dan Campbell. He understands kind of the offensive side of it that the Lions are going to try to run. And it's not like he's coming in as their offense coordinator because reportedly he didn't get that job. He instead is just a senior assistant. So he's not going to be like dictating play calls, which that'll be Ben Johnson or Dan Campbell. But instead, he'll be able to help with the pass game as it is Ben Johnson's first season as an offensive coordinator, kind of overlook things, understands the offense, and everywhere he's been, he's done a pretty nice job with the passing game side of things. So I feel like, again, the Lions got an upgrade here. They got an upgrade in the coaching staff with this hiring, and I'm in for it. Now, I do have a couple of notes from some of their players that were re-signed or signed, 2 deals. We got to hear from DJ Chark, Tracy Walker. We got to hear from a lot of these guys, but I had a couple of key notes that I want to point out. First off, starting with Charles Harris to quickly go to the defensive side of the ball. We know that we're going to be running more 4 defensive lineman sets, which you did see in the second half of the season. Again, I pulled up the film. You saw it against the Steelers. This was, something that you definitely saw in the second half of the season. And Charles Harris was asked about kind of the difference and the weight and things like that. He said last year he came in and his main goal was kind of just like maintaining his weight through the season. Talked about bulking up and building up a little bit more weight this season to play more of that base hand in the dirt 4-3 defensive end spot for the Lions. But then at the same time, he said again, his focus would be on maintaining his weight around 250 pounds. So it doesn't seem like there would be a huge weight difference, but he did acknowledge the fact that it would be more base defensive end looks. Now, they kept saying not dropping into coverage. Again, I don't believe that'll be the case. I still believe he'll be dropping into coverage, maybe less, but I definitely still believe that'll be a thing that he does is drop into coverage. Going to be interested in adding another safeties, of course, linebackers, guys that can help in coverage at the second and third levels, as these guys are going to be holding it down in the front 4. So that's one thing I thought I would point out how the foundation was laid last season, but at the same time, he wants to be a part of building the foundation and being a part of the foundation. He doesn't want to just kind of like jump onto the foundation when it's there. He wants to be one of those guys that are out there working to build it and build what the Lions are building. So those are a couple of notes that I want to point out from him. We also got to hear from Khalif Raymond, the Lions re-signing at the receiver position. I thought he had a really good press overall, so I do recommend checking that one out. But with Ben Johnson, he said Ben Johnson can see it from a player's perspective, and he was super excited to have a chance to work with Ben Johnson again this season and just go for it again. He's like, he's going to be a great coach. He actually is a great coach. That's what Ben Johnson is. He said he could see it from the player's eyes, from our perspective. He's like, if I'm thinking about doing this one thing, he already is like talking about how he sees it from their same perspective. So it works really well in the passing game, and he seems super excited to have him back. We know St. Brown has talked about the creativity there. Also, an interesting note, Khalif Raymond says he watches everybody's film. He's like, yeah, I knew about DJ Chark, what he's good at. He's like, you see the little things as a route runner that really makes him stand out. Of course, he talked about the speed and everything like that, but the little nuances as a route runner. He said he watches everybody's film in the NFL. He said he's watched everybody on the Jaguars depth chart just to try to improve his game. How they pushed each other like last season. When you see guys out there catching, passes on the jugs, whether that's Trinity Benson or someone else, and it would make him have to go catch on the jugs, and now it's just a daily routine to push each other. Who's going to catch more passes after practice? We talked about that going back to training camp. Amon-Ra St. Brown is out there catching passes after everybody. He said that as a punt returner, he had issues before as a punt returner. That's when he bought a jugs machine, so he was catching hundreds, thousands of punts. That way he stopped thinking about catching the punt. It was more about what I'm going to do after the ball's in my hands, and we know he was one of the top punt returners last season. I think that's a big reason that he was brought back. Also, we heard from T-Walk, who apparently was re-signed because he's funny. At least that's what he said. Well, this was his home, and he said, yeah, I had offers from other teams. There was other teams out there that, of course, my agent was talking to the Detroit Lions. There were other teams out there, but when they went through the options, when he woke him up, it was his home to go back to Detroit. He also said that he was nervous about, guys like Aaron Glenn and Aubrey Pleasant possibly leaving, but he was like, I'm blessed they're coming back for another season, and they had a huge impact over what he was able to do defensively last year. He also talked about playmaking in the back end. He's like, you guys know I can make plays. I can make plays. Some of the numbers just don't line up that way with the interceptions and things like that. But he's like, I still have better hands than Amani does. So hopefully, we get some picks from him next year. He only had the one this past year, but it was nice to see that because it was going back to 2019 was his last interception. That he was tired of losing. He was tired of being the laughing stock in the NFL just because of, the history of this team. He's like, I've been here for 4 years. They haven't won. I think the most games they said that he's won since he's been here is 6. So he wants to be a part of this winning thing, and he just felt like the Lions were home, even though he had other offers. And then finally with DJ Chark, we actually watched most of his interview live, but one note from DJ Chark, and I think he actually said this when we were watching it live, but DJ Chark did bring up the fact that he also had other teams interested, but he said it was the culture that, was the reason that he came to the Detroit Lions. It was the culture to come here. And of course, like I said, with other free agents, I think it's got to be interesting to look at it. If you play well, I'm going to get it re-signed. Like, that's just what the Lions proved that they're this year. They're not just saying it. If you come here, even if it is a proven deal, but yet you show out, this team is not going to hesitate to re-sign you. And I think that's a big factor as well. But he said it was the right fit for him. It was the right fit on the field, but at the same time, it was also the culture that sold him to come here. And the one thing that he said was it's nice to be in a place where you're wanted. Now, last year, he was coming from just an awful situation with Jacksonville. Yeah, we may have won the same amount of games, which he brought up, but it was clearly a different situation with whatever was going on with Urban Meyer and that whole coaching staff. But the way the Lions finished here to get their 3 wins was completely different than Jacksonville. And we know this year, they're just basically, signing everybody. He laughed and chuckled a little bit about the signing that they've made for a guy like Christian Kirk, which I thought was just insane. Like, you paid him that much for really? Like, it's crazy amount. But anyways, talked about being signed to a place where he is wanted. And that sounds really darn familiar to what Jared Goff said when he was traded here. It was actually like the exact same thing that Jared Goff said. Now, there are reports out there that the Detroit Lions have inquired about wide receiver Robert Woods. Don't know if it's true or not. Word saying that he's a prime trade candidate is out there because of the Allen Robinson signing. I don't know if I was the Rams, why in the world I would trade Robert Woods away. I think that would be crazy. I don't think Van Jefferson's that dude. I know they got Tutu Atwell coming back, but I think you'd be absolutely insane to get rid of that guy. But the Lions maybe could be interested. I mean, this was a guy that was part of one of their bigger signings with Andrew Whitworth on that first year of Sean McVay. So if the Lions were interested, it wouldn't shock me necessarily. We know he's coming off an injury, but he's a very productive receiver and had 2 of his best seasons, one over 1,200, one over 1,100 yards with Jared Goff as a quarterback. So if the Lions were interested and they inquired about it, even though it's not actually been said that the Rams are shopping him, it's just more that he's a prime trade candidate and teams are reaching out after they see the Allen Robinson deal. Wouldn't shock me if the Lions were interested because of the connection, because of what he's done with Goff and all of the above. He's a good receiver. He is. But he's also 29 years old, so you got to keep that in mind as well. There's also that factor. Wouldn't think the Lions would give up a ton for him, but if they were interested, again, it wouldn't be a huge surprise to me. Now, I wanted to wrap this thing up with just taking a quick look around the NFC North and some of the moves that they have made in free agency. Talked about a lot about the Lions. Go to doseofdn.com if you guys want to see our tracker. Free agent moves. Yesterday, it was the signing of Garrett Griffin, the tight end. We talked about that in our live stream. You go check it out. Really, the first 12 minutes is about Garrett Griffin. However, I just want to take a quick little peek. As of when I'm recording this video, things could have changed of what is going on around the NFC North. First off, let's take a look at the Green Bay Packers, and we're not going to go through it all super extensively, but just some of the moves that they have made just to point out here. They have extended Preston Smith on a 4-year deal. We know that they released Zadarius Smith to save some cap, which makes sense because they have Rashawn Gary, who has played really well, and I think Preston Smith is the better Smith brother. They also have Jonathan Garvin out there, so that made sense. Ravens were going to sign him, but apparently that didn't happen. Even though he was offered a $35 million deal, he backed out of it, so that hasn't happened yet. You can see where the cap space is projected, just over $1 million. Not very much money there, so I don't expect much more movement from the Packers, but the big move that did go down, which didn't save money because he wasn't under contract, we know was the Davante Adams trade, which we talked about yesterday. I won't go too deep into it, but basically they trade away Davante Adams to the Raiders who is on this 5-year deal now. And in return, they got a first-round pick and a second-round pick this season. Pick number 22, I think, this year, and then also their second-round pick this season. So they get those picks in return, but they lose Davante Adams, who has been one of the best receivers in the league and the go-to guy for Aaron Rodgers. You do have Allen Lazard, who they put a tender on, so it looks like he's probably going to be brought back. They definitely don't have that go-to number one receiver. And you can try to get that in the draft, but it's very unlikely that you're going to find that guy. That is Davante Adams. You're probably not going to, but you could definitely find a good receiver. They just haven't drafted a first-round receiver since 2003, which is the third longest active streak in the NFL. So that's the big news with them. Aside from that, Devondre Campbell has re-signed to a 5-year, $50 million deal after breaking out last season, which is like, whoa, that's a big deal. A new contract for Aaron Rodgers, which will drop his cap hit for this season about $18 million, a little over $18 million they will save for this season. Basically, with how it's set up technically is that he could be traded next season. Either that or he'll just be getting paid a lot of money next season. Understanding they were able to get, of course, under the cap number for the new league year. Now, this does not, of course, include Rasul Douglas, who they're expected to retain, but we don't have a contract details on that, so it does not include Rasul Douglas. Also, Randall Cobb is taking a $5.5 million pay cut to help them get under for the cap space, but of course, they're going to have to save more money than that, especially if they're going to bring back a guy like Rasul Douglas. And as you can see, they're also bringing in punter Pat O'Donnell from the Chicago Bears to help continue to upgrade that special teams unit, also going along with the new special teams coordinator that they have hired. Players that they are losing: Lucas Patrick, the guard, to the Chicago Bears; Oren Burks, the special teams player / linebacker, going to the San Francisco 49ers; Equanimeous St. Brown, Amon-Ra St. Brown's brother, going to the Chicago Bears as well. Zadarius Smith, as we said, he backed out of the Ravens contract. Other Packers that are free agents include Billy Turner, the guard; Robert Tonyan, the free agent tight end; Shannon Sullivan, who was like their slot corner, but that's not really a priority to bring him back; and Marquez Valdes-Scantling, the receiver. Talked about this before. I don't believe the Green Bay Packers are going to be as good of a team as they were last season, but they do have 2 new draft picks now that this Davante Adams trade has went down. So that's the biggest thing to keep an eye on here. They're going to still have to kind of try to work around the salary cap and things like that, and that's clearly what they are trying to do. So I don't expect many more big moves, if any kind of moves, from the Green Bay Packers. The draft is going to be very important for them. There's a lot of craziness going on there. We'll see how that plays out. On to the Minnesota Vikings. You look at their free agency so far, you can see their cap space at the top, $2.4 million. However, reportedly there is a restructure as of today that Adam Thielen is having with the Minnesota Vikings to save them about $5 million in cap space, which should get them around about $7.4 million from my understanding. They're losing tight end Tyler Conklin to the New York Jets. They're losing their center Mason Cole to the Pittsburgh Steelers, who got a pretty nice deal. Xavier Woods is going to the Carolina Panthers, and Michael Pierce over to the Ravens, which I'm pretty sure he was with the Ravens before, so I think that's just back to the Ravens. They're losing a lot of pieces on defense. They have a lot of older pieces on defense as well, especially in the front seven. The cornerback position definitely needs improvement. That's clear. Patrick Peterson being a free agent, and Mackenzie Alexander, who was their slot cornerback, but they need more help. Look for that position to be a spot where they probably draft a little bit heavy. Players that they brought in: Harrison Phillips, the defensive tackle, on a 3-year, $19.5 million deal. When you lose Sheldon Richardson and you're moving on from Michael Pierce, you need some help in that interior. So Harrison Phillips is one of those signings. Also, Jordan Hicks as a linebacker signing on a 2-year, $10 million deal. And Johnny, I'm not sure how you say his name, Munt? I don't know how you say his name, the tight end. Also, Austin Schlottman, a center / guard that they are signing, which the contract details have not been revealed on. Another big move there has been the extension of Kirk Cousins, which is mainly to lower his salary cap number as well for this season. I do like that pairing between their head coach and the quarterback. I like the pairing of Kevin O'Connell and Kirk Cousins. Yeah, don't expect a lot more big movement from them in free agency, but for that defense, they definitely need to improve. So look for the front seven, which they started to make some move on, but specifically that cornerback position where they must improve. Also, they placed a tender on their kicker, Greg Joseph, was a right of refusal tender. So we'll see if anything happens with that, which basically just gives them an opportunity to match the offer that another team, if another team gives them an offer, they have an opportunity to match that offer so that he can come back to the Minnesota Vikings. So not a lot of craziness going on in terms of additions for them, just kind of replenishing a little bit of that front seven, and then we know they need some cornerback help. Now on to the Chicago Bears. They're definitely in a different financial situation. You can see $30.3 million in cap space according to Over the Cap. They've also lost a lot of players, Allen Robinson being one of those guys who is headed off to the LA Rams on a 3-year deal. James Daniels, one of their bigger offensive line names, he is headed to the Pittsburgh Steelers on a pretty solid deal. Bilal Nichols, who is one of their rotational defensive linemen, headed to the Raiders. Artie Burns, a cheap deal for the Seattle Seahawks. Damian Williams, the running back to Atlanta. Have not seen the contract details on that. And Jakeem Grant to the Cleveland Browns to join Amari Cooper. They also have Akeem Hicks, who is hitting free agency, who is now like 33 years old, and Eddie Goldman, who they let go of, who is hitting free agency as well, the defensive tackle. It's going to be very weird to look at that front seven for the Chicago Bears. I mean, that's what they've been known for. We know they have a new coaching staff coming in there, but that's what they've been known for, right? Is kind of that front seven, the Khalil Macks, the Eddie Goldmans, the Akeem Hicks. But now to see that Akeem Hicks is free agent, Eddie Goldman's a free agent as of when I'm recording this video, Khalil Mack being traded, it just looks so much different. Throwing Danny Trevathan into the mix, the linebacker who they cut, Jimmy Graham, the tight end, Jermaine, if I fighty, I know I'm probably messing up that name, the right tackle. They need offensive line help. They do have Tevin Jenkins, who's coming back off the injury. He was the right tackle for Oklahoma State. I am a Tevin Jenkins fan, so that should help out a little bit getting a guy like that back. But they need offensive line help, which is part of the reason that they signed Lucas Patrick from the Green Bay Packers. Also, they brought in Al Quadin Muhammad, the defensive end, on a 2-year, $10 million deal. He's coming off a very solid season, a very good season, I should say. He's one of the top defensive ends in free agency from the Indianapolis Colts. Also, Justin Jones on a 2-year, $12 million deal. Now, I think a big reason for that is also because they're not getting Larry Ogunjobi, who is one of the bigger signings of free agency from the Cincinnati Bengals. He was one of the top interior defensive linemen to hit free agency. However, he failed his physical, so he will not be heading to the Chicago Bears, which is a very big loss for them in terms of free agency additions. So they bring in Justin Jones instead, I believe, from the Chargers. Like we said, Lucas Patrick, also Byron Pringle, because they're losing Jakeem Grant to the Cleveland Browns, and Nicholas Moreau on a cheap 1-year, $3 million type of prove-it deal. I like Nicholas Moreau coming from the Raiders. I like him in coverage, so I think that's a nice little under-the-radar addition for the Chicago Bears. It's going to be a new look for them. They have cap space, as we can see. They're getting draft picks from the Khalil Mack trade. They feel like they're kind of, sort of in, like, still that rebuild phase, of course, because you have a new coaching staff coming as well. But I do like the situation that they're in. I'm not a big Justin Fields guy, but I do like the situation that they are in, and I feel like that they can have some success. I like their situation better than I like the Minnesota Vikings situation, if I'm being honest. If I'm being honest, I like that situation better. I do like the Kevin O'Connell and Kirk Cousins pairing, but I like the Bears situation better than I like the Vikings situation. And personally, I think the Green Bay Packers, I don't think it's going to be great having Aaron Rodgers back, because I just don't think they're going to be as good of a team as they were last season. I feel like they peaked. He should have went elsewhere, but he came back. I think they're in a really weird spot. Right now, they're kind of working around the salary cap. Sort of the same thing with the Minnesota Vikings, with the Adam Thielen taking the pay cut, and then you have the Kirk Cousins extensions to drop his cap number for the season. Chicago Bears are in a good spot financially, as we saw coming into it, and now it's going to be a new look Chicago Bears. It really is. It's going to be kind of weird to see it like that. However, those are some of the updates surrounding NFC North. Again, all of this is subject to change in terms of their cap numbers and moves that they're making. This is just as of right now. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Prop, for watching, and I'm out.